Good day, everybody. Matt here from Greenius, and I just want to thank you all for joining our webinar today. Just before we get started, I just want to call out a few housekeeping items. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen is a chat window. So there you can click, you can chat, you can type questions, notes, statements. It's an opportunity to offer any opinions, any ideas, any insights that you might have that would add value to this. So feel free to use the chat and we can hopefully answer any questions you post in there. And we have some team members monitoring that. One of our team members, Noah's in there, and he's one of our excellent reps here at Greenius and LMN. He's well adversed in all of our topics here too. So he'll be able to kind of answer your questions. And then if you have one for our speakers, we'll call it out for everybody here. So we're excited to get started today. A little bit about me. I'm Matt. I'm the senior SVP here at Greenius. And really what we're trying to do here at Greenius is help contractors train and develop the employees you need to be successful, to scale your businesses, and really hit those profit margins you're trying for. So what we're really trying to do is train employees to be safer, more efficient, make less mistakes. And I think it's partly the reason why we're the #1 training platform in the industry. It's something that's really a passion of ours. So we brought together Botson Insurance. We have Greg here, we have Lisa here, and we're going to get to some introductions here from our speakers today. Just some key takeaways from today. I know when we get into a webinar scenario, it can be a lot of information. So really try to pick 3 or 4 action items or key insights that are really going to help your business and go execute on them. It's always a great point to really have that kind of 3 priorities that are important to you. So we're going to talk about realize the importance of snow contracts and sub-agreements, help you better understand what must-haves and what to avoid. And lastly, the tools needed to build a better snow contract program here. So I'm going to send it around to everyone to introduce themselves and give you an introduction to who they are. So I'll go with Lisa first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Rose. My business is Allen Rose Consulting. We do consulting to the snow and ice management industry, but also property managers and municipalities. In addition to that, we do expert witness work. So we assess cases strictly slip and fall on snow and ice.
Excellent. That's awesome. And Greg, if you can give us a little introduction, please.
Sure. My name is Greg Botson with Botson Insurance Group, a Higginbotham partner. Been in the business for 33 years and specialize in protecting landscape contractors to be better protected and have less stress and sleep better and make more profits. And we have a current program in Ohio for landscape insurance. And with our new partnership with Higginbotham, we're trying to take it multi-state and just provide better service and better protection.
Excellent. And Jeff, I know you don't need an introduction, but Jeff, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I can't be seen, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as I can be heard. But my name's Jeff Heller. I'm the president of Innovative Maintenance Solutions based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We are a landscape and snow provider within the state of Indiana. I am also a consultant with the Green Executive based out of Columbia, Illinois. Do all types of consulting work with the landscape and snow industry. And with them, I specialize with our snow clients.
Awesome. And one note I just want to call out before we get into the first question here is this is being recorded and it will be sent out to everyone. So if you miss something or you want to zoom back to it or share it with a team member, you will have full access to watch this at any time and follow up with it. And that'll be emailed to your inbox with the email you signed up with. I think it normally happens within that kind of first 24 hours. So you are going to get a copy of this. I just wanted to make note of that. So diving in here first, the first question we're going to talk about is what are the must-haves with finalizing your snow contract? And Lisa, I wonder if you could share some insights with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to jump right in because we don't have a lot of time. But the key thing I want to make note of is having a written snow contract. And I emphasize that because the contract really is an opportunity for the client to explain what they are expecting from you. And it is a commitment of what you plan to do. So a lot of times people will get on site after they have a contract awarded, and there's a maintenance manager who says, oh, don't worry about those back lots, or maybe you could add on these sidewalks. It is okay to request an addendum to your contract just to make sure those items are covered. And that's also because personnel may change, and then you don't have any documented source to advise who is responsible for doing those areas. So the other thing is, what you should put in the contract should be very clear. You definitely should want a clear and concise written contract. A lot of contractors don't like that. They don't think that's a good thing. It is good because that way there's no miscommunication, there's no misunderstanding of what is going to be done and who's responsible for what. At the end of a season, if you have a dissatisfied customer, it's a lot of times because they expected something different than what actually happened. Get that clarified in your contract. Obviously, everyone wants pricing in there, but you should cover what are the services to be performed. Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about plowing the lot, shoveling the walks, salt, calcium. What about pre-treatment? Don't forget about these other services that you offer that you may not have listed. How about site checks? If you haven't rolled that into your pricing for your services, it's okay to line item that out for site checks. Also talk about relocating or hauling snow. That's important. Maybe not lately, but you have to plan for those what ifs, right? You have to be ready, and that's part of what's included in the contract. The next thing is, when is the work to be done? Sounds simple, right? Maybe a 2-inch trigger. I'm talking about the things that you may not have accounted for in the contract. For example, what's the ice trigger, de-icing trigger? How will freezing rain be handled? That's important. What are the operating hours? If you have a gas station, I hope you're servicing before the people show up in the morning for their coffee and donut. But if you have a doctor's office who may not open until 9 or 10, that's a little easier for you to plan out your route and give great service to your customers. Think about high traffic times, like in the morning for the coffee and donut. Think about personnel changes. If you have a facility where there are shifts, make sure you're there before people are walking out onto that parking lot to get to their cars to go home. Then we want to talk about where. Where are you going to perform these services? I know, we said parking lot. It's obvious, right? Maybe not so. If there are more than one parking lot, then make sure you number them or letter them, but define them somehow if they're part of your contract. The other thing is little areas like fire hydrants. What about mailboxes, back entrances? We just ran into a situation where there were removable speed bumps, right? So if you have to do that, it's going to take more time. You have to remove them, plow, and put them back. So that seems like a lot to put into a contract, but here's the other thing I'll mention. You should have had all that information, quite honestly, when you did a request for proposal. All those factors should go into how you do your pricing. So it should not be all that difficult for you to make sure that those items are included in the contract. The other thing I recommend is doing a site map. That can become part of the contract. That's easy. You can put tile placement on there. All of those types of things can be included. And then one last thing that I will mention that we run into a lot with our slip and fall cases is how to handle split rolls. Those are rolls where the store wants an on-site person to clear the front walks. And that's fine. That's understandable. They're trying to save some money, and they also want it to be cleared more often than you're going to show up on the site. But the problem is the person doing it may not be trained, and maybe they just really don't want to do it. So what are they going to do? They're going to walk out the door, drop the shovel, push the snow right off onto the front of the parking lot. Guess what? If you're responsible for the walks, it's now your responsibility. So find out how that split roll is going to be handled and have something in the contract, even saying that you're not responsible for those front walks. You can also include what you're not responsible for. I think those are the key items that I wanted to cover today. A clear and concise written contract, detail the services to be performed, detail when and where to perform the services, and how to handle those split rolls.
That's awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And if you have any specific questions around must-haves on this topic here, throw them in the chat. Again, we'll keep having a look there and seeing if we can't help you out with anything you might be struggling with or just looking for some clarity around. So again, feel free to throw that in there and we'll see if we can help you out. Moving on to our next question here. What are the must-avoids when signing a third-party contract? And now we're going to turn to Jeff here for some of his insights on this topic.
Well, I'm going to play off of the excellent advice that Lisa's just provided. She was discussing contractors' contract with their customer. And as the contractor, you should know your contract forwards and backwards. But what if you're asked to sign a third-party agreement? Becomes even more important to read and understand the contract itself. And I've got 3 key items that I will cover here. And first and foremost is looking at definitions. Specifically, I have many contracts, at least 50% of third-party contracts that come across my desk, either for review or that my company's being asked to sign. And they use the word snow removal as opposed to clearing or plowing. Might sound like a play on words, but in our business, the word removal would imply that we are physically removing the snow from the site, including pavement, sidewalks, maybe possibly even the roof. If this is not being done, that wording needs to be changed from removal to either snow clearing or snow plowing. I am familiar with a case where a gentleman was contracted to clear snow from a parking lot, performed his duties word for word according to the contract, and somebody showed up on that parking lot, went into the building, and actually fell inside of the building in an aisle. And that contractor was sued and lost because of the word snow removal in his contract. So you need to be very vigilant when reviewing third-party contracts as to the wording. And if I could, I'll add on to that a little bit. You need to be careful with the words like any or all when you're reviewing a third-party contract. And an example of that would be, I have seen contracts come across my desk where they would say the trigger for snow clearing operations shall commence at 1 inch of accumulation. And Lisa covered this in her section, but this particular contract went on to say that the contractor shall be responsible for keeping the lot clear of snow and ice at all times. So at the very least, you're performing a fair bit of work for free when you're trying to keep the lot clear and of snow and ice at all times. But at the worst, say you get a dusting of snow 1/4 of an inch, you look at your contract, says, well, we're not obligated to do anything until 1 inch of accumulation, and somebody slips and falls on that 1/4 of an inch of light accumulation, pretty good chance that you're going to be responsible for that. So you want to make absolutely sure that you're looking for words such as any and all when you're reviewing a third-party contract. Secondly, and again, playing off what Lisa said earlier, you need a well-defined scope of work. The scope of work should specifically define what is to be done, when it is to be done, and who's responsible for doing it. Lisa mentioned split roles. That is very common in a lot of hybrid contracts out there nowadays, where the contractor is responsible for plowing the parking lot and applying the anti or de-icing materials while the customer clears their sidewalks. Lisa mentioned, well, what if you've been on the lot and you've plowed the lot and you've de-iced and you've left, and somebody from the customer site comes out, shovels all the snow off the sidewalk into the drive lanes? Who's responsible for that? In many cases, it's going to be the contractor. You need to make sure, as Lisa had mentioned, that there's site maps included in the scope of work and in the contract showing where snow will be piled, what areas are to be cleared first. For instance, in many retail establishments, it's going to be the front drive lanes first, then the handicap parking, then the entrances and the exits, then the docks, and then the main part of the parking lot. You also need to make sure that it is defined as to who makes the call for service, whether it's the customer or the contractor. In my case, when I'm doing consulting work, I always recommend that the contractor decides on when service is to commence. We're the experts in this field, not the customer. It's also important to decide if the customer were to decline service, how is that handled? It needs to be in writing, and it needs to be spelled out in the contract how that's handled as far as whether or not the contractor is held harmless or not. My third recommendation when reviewing third-party contracts is to make sure it is defined in there the right to stop work if payments are late or not made at all by the customer. Who's going to be held harmless? Is it going to be the contractor that's held harmless because they've not been paid and decided to pull off the lot? I've seen many contractors that are behind in getting payments and just decide on their own that I'm not going to show up the next time it snows. And without consulting that agreement, they could be held liable, I should say, without even knowing about it, just because they're in an agitated state of mind and decided, I'll show the customer who's who. I just won't show up. You also need to make sure that acts of God are spelled out in your agreements as well with third parties. That's going to spell out what should be done in cases such as snow blowing off the roof, blowing and drifting snow in the lot, blizzard clauses, ice clauses. How are all those handled? Are you responsible for that? Are you responsible for site monitoring for things such as refreezing? So all things to consider, but first and foremost, when you're looking at a third-party contract, you just need to make sure that you're reading the contract and getting the right help in deciphering what the contract's actually saying.
That's very well said. And Greg, you had one last point there you wanted to note on.
Yeah. I just want to kind of follow what Jeff said is, read it, and then even have your attorney or contract expert review it before you sign. I know a lot of times you just want to sign the contract and get the job and get the initial payment, but it's very important to review it with a legal specialist or a contract specialist before you sign. I had a situation, Jeff mentioned, watch out for the words "if any." We had a client who got sued because he signed a contract. He was held responsible for potholes in the parking lot, and the person tripped on a pothole, and they sued the snow contractor, and he was held liable because of that broad contract. So you definitely need to have a third party review, and we can talk about some services that we offer that can help you.
That's great. And I just wanted to pause a quick second. There's a few questions that have come up here in the chat. So I'm just going to read out the first one here. It's from John. Last year, I had a client print out my contract and write on it. They crossed out hauling prices, wrote in a max price for the year and a couple other details. Should I rewrite the contract, or is that contract with handwriting details and their signature enough? Lisa, do you have any insights there?
Yeah, I sure do. The key component there is make sure it's legible for anyone who's not familiar with the contract. I see a lot of contracts that have scribbles all over them, and I have no clue what they were trying to achieve. And the secondary part to that is, when they cross out your pricing, listen, that's a different ballgame. Make sure that what they're putting in is what you agree to. Don't just agree to something. Remember, I mentioned this, you need to price these according to how you run your business and making money, right? So it's really easy for them to mark something off. They're all about saving money. So I just caution you about what they have crossed out. But no, I have seen contracts that are executed by all parties, by both parties, that have writing on them. Again, my key takeaway is make sure it's legible. Like, it's so hard to read some of those things.
That's a great point. I wouldn't have thought that before this, to make sure it's legible. Like, that always comes into play, even in my world where handwritten notes can be misinterpreted. So no, that's really good. Thank you. The next question was, this is from Cleveland, Ohio. Do you have a local contract specialist or attorney that specializes in contracts that you could recommend? Greg, you mentioned you might have access to services under that. Is that something they could reach out to you about for some help there in finding somebody?
I could. One of the services that we offer as part of our engagement as a customer of our agency is contract reviews. So we have 4 or 5 people on staff that can review contracts, and they are attorneys, but they're not acting as your attorney, but they could give some advice on that. But it is, you need to be a client of the agency.
Great. And then one question here before we move on to our next section. What do you recommend for companies that hire subs to provide snow removal services? How do they ensure the third-party contract agreement is not compromised?
Could you repeat that, Matt?
Yeah. So what do you recommend for companies that hire subs to provide snow removal contracts? How do they ensure the third-party contract agreement is not compromised?
Lisa, is that something that well, I guess I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm not sure I understand. If you're the one hiring the sub, if you're the contractor and you're hiring the sub, you clearly should know what you're putting in that sub agreement. And it absolutely, one of the things I see, and Jeff will be able to speak better about this than I, you can take the contract between the customer and actually up the level of service, because you want to make sure that it's taken care of. So if it's a 2-inch trigger, you have a 1-inch trigger. Again, you have to figure that out in terms of pricing for your company. So I guess I'm not sure I understand exactly where the failure is coming in terms of a third-party contract.
I'll just jump in and say that I have seen contracts where I'll define this as the customer, the contractor, and the service department, where the service partner is the one actually performing services. I have seen cases where the contractor, in order to maintain some form of margin that meets their needs, will pass on to a service partner a contract that allows for cutting corners. While that may be great over the course of one season to gain some what I would call unscrupulous margins, it is something that's not viable, specifically in the snow industry where the liability is so high. I would agree with Lisa. I think that if you have a subcontractor, your agreement should go above and beyond what you're what the customer is asking of you, and that you should be very familiar with your subcontractor agreement, where really all you're filling in is a customer's scope of work. That should really be about the only thing that's different. You should always have in your subcontractor agreement, no matter who the customer is, your terms of payment, your expectations, because really it just boils down to the word expectations, that your customer, the contractor, and the subcontractor service partner are all on the same page, and you're all understanding your why as to why you're there, why you're doing the work. And that relationship should flow from the customer all the way down to the service partner or subcontractor.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Jeff. In the interest of moving along here, I'm going to hop on to our next topic. And then there is a couple more questions that have just come in. We're going to get to them at the very end there. So if you do have some questions that aren't answered in the chat, I do have a note here and we're going to get to them at the end here. We just got one more section we wanted to talk about. And those are, what are the must-haves with your subcontractor agreement, which is kind of a great flow from the topic we were just on there. So Greg, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure. There's 3 must-haves in a subcontractor agreement. And the first one is, like Lisa said, you must have an agreement in writing and signed. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of landscapers over the years. And you'd be surprised how many, small ones, but as well as large companies, don't have a subcontractor agreement or don't use it. So I've seen reasons like they don't have time, they don't understand why they need one, their sub has insurance, so they don't need it, and they'll never get sued. So those are all reasons, but the bottom line is you need to protect yourself and you need to protect your company and your assets and your subs by having a written signed agreement. I would consult your insurance agent on the insurance side of the agreement and your attorney on the legal side of the agreement before you implement it or before you update it. Another section of having a written agreement would be you only need one agreement when you start, and then that just stays in the file. You don't have to get a new one every year. But if you change it at all, then you should get a new signature from the subcontractor. And then the last part of the signed sub agreement would be you have to detail out what insurance coverages they are required to have, from general liability, including coverage for liabilities after the work is completed and while they're at the job site, general liability or commercial auto insurance, equipment insurance, umbrella. So all the insurance requirements that you're going to require should be in that sub agreement, and that they need to provide a certificate of insurance so that they have it. So that's the first must-have. The second must-have is they must have you listed as an additional insured on their policy. In the interest of time, I'm going to just say an additional insured will be added to your subs policy, and you will be covered under your subs policy if they go out and hurt somebody or cause property damage. Their insurance will cover you up to their limits, and then your insurance will take place after that, after their limits are exhausted. And that's a mandatory coverage now with most insurance companies. They want to see certificates and additional insured endorsements, and it is an endorsement. The last thing that you must have in your program is a valid certificate of insurance on file for each year. This verifies that the sub has insurance and they have the required insurance, including listing you as an additional insured. But just as important, it's going to say that, or it's going to be proof that when you're audited by your insurance company, and you will get audited these days, that they have insurance and that you're not being charged as them being an employee, and at a much higher rate, and then you owe thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in additional insurance because your subs don't have insurance and you didn't provide a certificate. So my general rule to my clients is don't pay a sub until they've signed a sub agreement and request a certificate every year, and have a file for them and request the certificates the same time every year and keep it in a file. So when you are audited, you'll have that available and you won't be charged extra money. So those are the top 3 things that you should have in your subcontractor agreement.
That's great. Thanks, Greg there. So just a call out for, we still have those questions there. I just got a couple slides and then we'll end with the Q&A session. But just some webinar bonuses you're going to get for attending today. We're going to send out a sample contract. There's a third-party contract review included with an engagement with Botson Insurance. So when you reach out to Greg, he can talk about those services there as well. And a subcontractor agreement as well. It's going to have a sample agreement in there and a bunch of stuff you need there. So that's going to be sent out. I believe Angelica from the LMN team here is going to be handling getting those out to you as well. And we just wanted to call out here that the partnership we formed here between Greenius Botson Insurance and the Ohio Landscape Association, and really Greenius handles the training, the employee development, making your company safer, and really developing your employees. And then the Ohio Landscape Association really covers that education, that advocate, and to elevate. And then lastly, when you bring that all together with Botson Insurance, you could be eligible for a 20% discount on your insurance. If you're both using Greenius and a member of the OLA, you could be getting better insurance rates. So I highly recommend reaching out to Greg there and just having a conversation and just seeing what can be done there. So I just want to call this out, this new partnership, and I think it's going to be great for the industry. And we're really starting strong in Ohio with these 3 great organizations there. So I just wanted to take a second and call that out there. I'll pause here too. I'll get back to those questions now. And I did want to call out, this is going to be a 3-part series. So part 2 will be on slip and falls, how to avoid being sued, paying a claim. That'll be September 19th. And then the 3rd part will be snow safety training for employees. So how do we really get those employees ready to survive those 12-hour shoveling shifts, and so they don't show up in jeans and sneakers and expect to remove snow for 12 hours and enjoy doing it and come back night after night. So how do you prevent that and reduce your headaches? We'll get into all of that there. So we did have a few more questions here. So I'll start at the top. Is there thoughts on contract differences for commercial versus residential clients? So is there a difference between those 2 contracts, or is it kind of a similar path for both? Would that be Lisa?
Well, I'll jump in and just say that I deal mostly with commercial contracts. It's been a number of years since I've done residential contracts. They're obviously, in my opinion, much less detailed. The timing is not as crucial. You don't have people on and off the site in the volume that you do for a commercial location. And the difference being a commercial location is inviting people into their facility when they're open for business. So that's also a difference between commercial and residential. But it's still recommended that you have a contract, and I still stand by the same thing. Put forth what it is you plan to do. What's your commitment to the customer? So Jeff may be able to add some additional words of wisdom.
I would just echo what Lisa says. Like Lisa, I live in the commercial world. I don't do anything in residential, but I'll go back to that word, expectations. Everything needs to be defined as to what the customer expects and what the contractor is going to do for the money that they are being offered to do it.
Excellent. And Jeff, I think that leads on to this next question. Maybe I'll get your insights here. What are your thoughts on plowing a commercial lot that's declining salt services?
That is literally a slippery slope. I walk away from more business than I accept, and that is one of the main reasons. I actually have a very good friend here in Indianapolis that owns a rather large office complex that caters primarily to the medical field. So there's a lot of elderly people that access his lot. And while he stopped doing it now for years, he would bug me every year to take on his snow clearing sites, but he would not pay for salt. He would actually tell me, well, that's what insurance is for. Mm-hmm. So every year I would refuse. And so from my perspective, if that's not something that can be ironed out, I would walk away from that.
I'm going to jump in, Jeff. That is great. And it is always such a hard decision to walk away from business. We all know that. You want the business, you want the contract, but it is a very, very slippery slope. If you are already in a contract and they're declining your right to salt, I'm going to tell you these 3 words: document, document, document. And it's not just, oh, I got a text message that says they told me not to salt. I recommend you email that to yourself. You email that to the client. You have the date and the time, and you say, I'm acknowledging that you are going against my professional recommendation of servicing this site with de-icing material. I can't even tell you how much it is how imperative it is you get that documented.
Well said. And I've heard that multiple times about document. It's a huge thing from everyone that's trying to help protect your business. It always comes back to that documentation. So I'm glad you said that. That's really, really important.
Yeah, I have one comment, and if several years ago, you guys couldn't get salt. So I'm assuming there's clauses in the contract. What is it, force majeure, something like that, where if salt's not available, it hopefully lessens the liability. Lisa, can you maybe comment on that?
I can. I will tell you though, it's your responsibility to be prepared. Yes, those clauses are in there. It is a severe safety measure just in case there is nationwide. We have had those salt shortages in the past. I don't know. I haven't seen those in a few years. And again, on top of it, it's really your job to plan. Also, with all the weather forecasting availability now, that's significantly improved. So having your product available shouldn't be an issue, in my opinion, from a contractor standpoint.
That's great. We do have Two more questions here, but I just want to call out, we are a bit over time, so I know your time's extremely valuable. If you do have to hop off, just calling out again, this is recorded and will be emailed to you, so you can pick up where you left off if you have another meeting or an appointment you got to get to, but still want to hear everything. This will be emailed to your inbox. So I'm just calling that out, but we do have a few more minutes here to try to get to a few more questions here. So Mike is asking, do you have any insight to service issues on day one and day two after the event and how that's handled in contract language for ice control?
I'll jump in and talk about this. This is why also you can have site checks. I've seen some people adding site checks as a service, and they actually charge separately for it. From a contractor standpoint, keep checking the site. If there is moisture, if you have sub-freezing surface temperatures, you have the potential for ice. You can put in a contract that you're going to limit it to 24 hours or 48 hours, but then what's the plan? Like, who's going to take that responsibility? You're the professional. They're going to come back. The client's going to come back and say, we relied on you. So honestly, why wouldn't you want to keep servicing? I mean, you're making money. You're making money if you're going out and applying product. Or again, make a separate line item for site check.
That's great.
Excellent.
And our last question, if we over service a site, example, plowing at 1 inch versus 2 inches, does that leave us open for potential problems?
Servicing over and above a contract, in my opinion, does not. If there's a slip and fall, you certainly have the opportunity to say, we serviced even more than the contract asked for. But make sure you're doing it correctly. Don't just plow at 1 inch because you're ahead of it and then don't apply product. So the normal course should be followed whether you plow at 1 or 2. I'm seeing contracts with 4-inch trigger. To me, that is so hazardous. There's no way that you can create a safe environment letting 4 inches of snow fall before you service. So being ahead of it, I personally think is always better.
That's great.
I'll just add to that. From my piece when I was talking, I mentioned a trigger for 1 inch, but the lot should be clear of snow and ice at all times. I think it's fine to over service to Lisa, and Lisa makes an excellent point. If you do it correctly, you're really going to be limiting your liability. However, on the backside, could be some issues trying to recoup money for those extra services.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I would like to add, Matt, that the insurance industry right now is really tightening up on snowplow contractors, and they're requesting copies of your contract as well as third-party contracts that you sign, especially for big box store and high traffic areas like hospitals and medical facilities. So it's probably not going to get loosened up anytime soon. So make sure you do get your documentation and plan accordingly, because it will affect your insurance rate or your ability to get insurance if you don't have the proper documentation.
I'll echo Greg's comments on that. I'm audited every single year, so Greg is 100% correct. And during my audits, I am asked for my customer contract as well as my subcontractor agreements.
Excellent. That's very well said. And a great way to end us. So thank you, everybody, for attending today. And Jeff, Lisa, and Greg, thank you very much for your time and insights. Hopefully somebody got a key insight that's just going to change their entire winter season. And maybe they're opening up their contract as we speak and changing some wording. So thank you very much for your time today. And again, everybody, this will be emailed out to you, to your inbox, normally again within 24 hours there. So I hope you join us for part 2 and part 3 coming up, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.